to meet our needs both now and for future generations. We can do it. We must do it for the well-being of our country today and for those future generations. Madam President, I thank you for this opportunity, and I suggest the absence of a quorum call.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that we now proceed to consideration of, that we dispense with the reading of the roll.
Without objection, morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to consideration of S-493, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 17, S-493, a bill to reauthorize and improve the SBIR and the STTR programs and for other purposes.
You just said noon.
I ask unanimous consent that we now proceed to consideration of S-493 and have a period of debate until noon.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I now have 7 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leader. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate the cooperation of both leaders to help us get to the floor this morning for a debate on this very important piece of legislation, and one, Madam President, that we've actually and unfortunately struggled with for the last 2 Congresses. And you know, as a member of the Small Business Committee and as a senator from New Hampshire, how important this piece of legislation is as we continue to fight, and that's what the word is here, fight, to create jobs right here at home in America, not just on Wall Street, not just in the fancy places, but on Main Street in our hometowns all over America. And Senator Snowe and I are on the floor today together, happily, to talk about a bill that she's put a tremendous amount of time and effort into before as chair of the committee. Now I serve as chair of the committee, and she is my very able ranking member. And together our staffs have worked very, very closely for a long period of time to try to fashion the compromise that is before the Senate today. I want to thank the 84, I believe, members of the Senate that voted for cloture last night. I know the rules of the Senate are strange still to many Americans, but we really can't operate without unanimous consent. So it takes an extra special level of cooperation. And while we didn't get everyone last night to go on the record, we did get the prerequisite number above 60 to move to this debate. And I'm hoping that our amendment process can be very smooth, that we stay focused on small business-related amendments, that we work in good faith, and hopefully in the next couple of days we could get this bill off the floor, because this is a job creator. And one of the senators was here earlier this morning talking about creating an atmosphere for job growth and development. Tax codes do some of that. Federal investments in infrastructure do that. Investments in education do that. But one other thing that does it is fashioning federal programs that work for the job creators of America. And that's what the SBIR program is, an STTR program. It's the federal government's largest research and development investment program for small businesses. It was created actually 30 years ago, and the idea developed from one of our outstanding federal workers. He worked for Roland Tibbett, was a staffer at the National Science Foundation. He took the lead in 1976 in directing a greater and more significant share of the research and development budget of the National Science Foundation and directed it to small business in a new innovation program. Why did he do this, Madam President? He did it because from his position directing a very established and strong research component, he saw the federal government giving most of its awards to large businesses. And I think, although I haven't spoken to him personally, but I most certainly intend to because he's testified before former committees, I'm imagining that he probably had a heart for actually wanting to find cures for some diseases and realized that not all of that technology and innovation rested with the large companies, that in fact there might be small pharmaceutical companies or brilliant scientists in Maine or in New Hampshire or in Louisiana that had discovered or had the potential to discover something that could be transformative. And so this staffer said, let's set aside or direct a small portion, but an important portion, to small businesses. That is how this program began. And I am so pleased that this funding, which only government can do, only government can do this. There's certain things the private sector does well. They do venture capital when an idea has been proven, or when the potential has clearly been established, or when the potential is at least clearly established in the mind of one or two individuals, like the guy that created Facebook, or, Bill Gates with Microsoft. But mostly, great ideas need early, patient capital. Very risky, but when it hits big. That's what this program does. It sets aside 2.5 to 3% of all the research and development budgets of all the federal agencies, ranging from the Department of Defense, which is about $1 billion would be contributed to this program, down to the smaller agencies, which have maybe up to a couple of $1 million in their research budgets. But out of that very pilot-like initiative back in 1976 that was focused on discovering, funding, and evaluating the initial highest risk, most cost-cutting exploratory research that is necessary to achieve significant technological innovations and breakthroughs, this program was created. Let me share with you what a gentleman who testified before our committee. We've had several hearings on this particular program. And no program's perfect. Let me begin with this. This program is not perfect, but we are perfecting it as we bring this bill to you. We've looked at its weaknesses. We've tried in our reauthorization to correct those, to firm those up. But one of the gentlemen who is actually probably the leading expert on this program, Dr. Wessner of the National Research Council, recently testified before our committee. He said, quote, "An important point to keep in mind is that you can have really good ideas that simply die. They die because they don't have funding, not because they don't have potential, but because they don't have funding." And I would add to this, particularly in this time of recession and tightening back on capital and closing down of credit card lending, if you think it's normally tough for entrepreneurs and innovators and discoverers and inventors to get capital, it's been a very rocky road this last year or two. So he said that these ideas just die. SBR brings capital to transform those ideas into innovation. You're not done then, but that gets you the innovation and product development and the start of the uptake. The rest of the world, he says, thinks this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. The rest of the world is copying it, putting it on steroids while we debate it. And that is the point I want to make. We've debated the reauthorization of this for 6 years. The time is to stop the debate, pass the bill, and recognize this is a world model. No program is perfect, but the wisdom and the importance of setting aside a small portion of the research and development programs of all the federal agencies and then train our workforce and our managers to look out, seek, and find some of the interesting technologies that could be created grow into big businesses is really very forward-thinking. And we should be very grateful to Roland Tibbetts and to the senators and representatives that started this program. Warren Rudman, Senator Rudman, took this idea, saw this pilot program, and made it a national program. And we have him and others to thank for the jobs, the businesses that have been created. Let me just give you one example. The founder of Qualcomm came and testified before our committee. Now, Qualcomm is a very famous business. It developed a lot of the technologies that made wireless communications possible. It started 25 years ago in the den of its founder, Dr. Jacobs. He testified before the committee and said basically Qualcomm was just, at one time, 25 years ago, an exciting new idea. It wasn't a company. It wasn't a business. He and 35 of his colleagues consulted together and talked about the new technologies that they were seeing. They got an SBIR grant of $150,000, and then they were subsequently awarded, because they developed the idea, to $1.5 million. They got another grant, which are the limits of the program. This program has limits. You get to have to test your idea, and then you come back for Phase 2 funding. Well, Madam President, Qualcomm now employs 17,500 people. They're operating in 22 countries. They paid more in taxes last year to local, state, and federal government than 50% of the cost of this entire program. So one success story. That's what I mean when I say when it hits big. Now, not every company will turn into Qualcomm, but without programs like this, there's what they call a valley of death. They're ideas that are created out of the minds and hearts of Americans who have been well educated, raised to believe that dreams come true, or encouraged to risk. We are natural risk takers. We have these ideas and these innovations, but what happens is if there's not that important early funding to develop that kind of science and technology, in large measure, some of these ideas just fall into the valley of death. We're going to catch them, and that's what this bill does. It's what it attempts to do, this program. And so as it's grown and developed, and we've reauthorized it over the years, there have been some important changes and improvements. And I'm going to recognize the ranking member in just a moment, but I want to just finish up for just a few minutes here. In 1980, the White House Conference on Small Business echoed these sentiments, recognized the value of the program. The end result of the recommendation was this program, as I said, first authored by Senator Warren Rudman. It had 84 co-sponsors, 8 of whom are still serving in the Senate: Senator Baucus, Senator Cochran, Senator Grassley, Senator Hatch, Senator Inouye, Senator Leahy, Senator Levin, and Senator Lugar. They all were original sponsors of this bill. I hope they're proud. In their careers have probably sponsored many bills. I hope they're proud of this one because it's done its job, and it really has helped America to continue to honor our entrepreneurs and our inventors. As I mentioned, Senator Rudman was a Republican from New Hampshire. Once a member of our committee, was the Senate champion. He was a true statesman, a man of vision with regard to the importance of technology to our economy. I just want to quote him as we begin this debate. He said this: "The issue addressed in Senate Bill 881 at the time is one which plays an underlying role in the ability of this nation to maintain its security, to achieve energy independence, increase productivity, and preserve the quality of life we all enjoy. Our national strength and confidence in these areas," he said, "depend upon maintaining a leading role in technological superiority." This is what he said in his opening statement at the Senate Subcommittee on Innovation and Technology on June 30th, 1981. Senator Snowe was in the House at the time. She was a congresswoman when President Reagan signed this legislation, creating it in 1982. She quoted from President Reagan, and I know she will probably remember this, but she said, and I think it's worth repeating, "Our nation is blessed with 2 important qualities that are often missing in other societies: our spirit of entrepreneurship, our capacity for invention and innovation. These 2 elements are combined in the small businesses that dot our land." And so, Madam President, I'm proud to bring this bill to the floor. It has had extraordinarily positive and noble champions since its beginning. As I said, no program is perfect, but we've tried in this reauthorization to look at the places where it's weak, the program was weak, and strengthen it. I'll go through that in the latter part of the afternoon, some of those details. But just for an overview this morning, I wanted to give more of a historical context to this bill, to thank the members for moving so quickly and at our request to the bill, and I look forward to the debate. And I hope that members will be responsible in offering their amendments. I know that time for debate is precious on the floor, and we'd really like to limit it to debate reflected around the principles, at least, and the details of this bill as best we can. and really getting this program reauthorized so that we can continue to be the leading cutting-edge innovation, and the federal government can do its part, an important part that venture capitalists can't do, big banks don't want to do, investment bankers aren't made to do it, small community banks don't do this kind of lending. Only patient, directed capital can give that boost over the valley of death and create that bridge so small businesses and our scientists and engineers can walk over it safely. And I'd like to recognize at this time my ranking member and thank her for her support of this legislation from its beginning and her championship to this day. And for clarification purposes, the time until noon will be for debate only and no amendments until after lunch. Senator Snowe.
Thank you. Mr. President.
The senator from Maine.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, I want to commend the chair of the Small Business Committee, who's done an extraordinary job in bringing this legislation to the floor in a bipartisan fashion, which I think is so essential to ensuring the passage of this legislation, which, suffice it to say, has been long overdue. It's been on a long journey since 2006 in terms of extensions and re-extensions, but we have never been able to accomplish a reauthorization for a variety of reasons that I'll explain later in my statement. But I do want to congratulate the chair for working mightily on both sides of the aisle in the committee, accommodating the bipartisanship by allowing the new members of the committee, particularly on our side of the aisle where we have 5 new members of the committee who were not able to have the opportunity to review this legislation as new members of the Senate because we had passed this unanimously in the last session of Congress. So she did hold hearings and a markup to accommodate those views and give them a chance to review this legislation and also to amend it in the committee, and I know some of the members will have amendments that they will offer on the floor as well. But I want to thank the chair for accommodating those various issues and the members of the committee as they attend to their new duties as members of the Small Business Committee. I also want to thank the chair for working through these issues diligently because these are 2 critical programs, as she's indicated in her opening statement, that are crucial to small businesses but also important to the innovation of America. Reauthorizing both the SBIR and the STTR programs represents a profound opportunity for us to reaffirm the truth and the optimistic vision of America that indeed it's small businesses that are going to make the contributions not only for job creation, but through their innovation and invention, as the chair mentioned with President Reagan's comments many years ago. That's why I'm very excited about the reauthorizing of these programs. It will foster an environment of innovative entrepreneurship by directing more than $2 billion annually in the federal research and development funding to nation's small firms most likely to create jobs and commercialize their products. Small businesses are our nation's job generators, employing more than half of all the private sector employees and creating 64% of the net new jobs over the past 15 years. They also represent 99% of all employer firms. Furthermore, small businesses are our nation's most effective innovators, producing roughly 13 times more patents per employee than large firms, patents which are at least 2 times as likely to be among the top 1% of high-impact patents. Recipients of both of these awards have produced more than 85,000 patents and have generated millions of well-paying jobs across all 50 states. It's crucial, then, that both of these programs, one of the strongest examples of a successful public-private partnership, be a key part of the agency's job creation agenda. The SBIR program got its start at the National Science Foundation back in 1976, following growing concerns that small businesses were not receiving an adequate share of the federal research and development funding, despite their prominent role in innovation. It was officially established in law as part of the Small Business Innovation Development Program of 1982. As what the chair indicated, I was an original co-sponsor in the House, and hopefully it's not dating myself too much. which sets 4 goals for the program: stimulate technological innovation, use small business to meet federal R&D funds, foster and encourage participation by minority and disadvantaged persons in the technological innovation, and increase private sector commercialization of innovation derived from federal R&D. The STTR program was established in 1992 to complement the SBIR program by stimulating partnerships between small businesses and nonprofit research institutions such as universities and research laboratories. Together, these vital job creation programs have provided small firms with over $28 billion during their lifespans. These programs have been front and center in improving our nation's capacity to innovate. According to a report by the Innovation Technology and Innovation Foundation, SBIR-backed firms have been responsible for roughly 25% of the nation's most crucial innovations over the past decade. Plus, it indicated a powerful demonstration that SBIR programs have become a key force in the innovation economy of the United States. Furthermore, a comprehensive 2008 National Academy of Sciences study of the SBIR program noted that more than 20% of companies responding to their survey noted they were founded entirely, or at least in part, because of a prospective SBIR award. And a full 2/3 said that the projects they performed would have not taken place without the funding. Just under half of the projects pursued in the SBIR program reached the marketplace, bringing countless new innovations to our everyday lives. Additionally, the study noted that over 1/3 of the companies awarded SBIR funding participate in the program for the first time each year, thus encouraging innovation across a broad spectrum of firms. And it concludes that SBIR is sound in concept and effective in practice. In fact, there are a wide range of remarkable success stories associated with the SBIR program, including Qualcomm that the Chair mentioned. But you know, it's remarkable that Qualcomm received roughly a $1.5 million SBIR grant to pursue several innovative programs and develop breakthrough technologies. Now it employs 17,500 individuals worldwide with an annual revenue of $11 billion. Alone in 2010, Qualcomm paid $1.4 billion in federal, state, and local taxes, a significant return on investment. Another example of SBIR's success is the LASIK eye surgery. The company behind the technology for the procedure received SBIR awards from NASA and Department of Defense. In the 1980s, NASA awarded funding to a project developing technology for docking of space vehicles to satellites by pointing to laser beams. This concept was then applied that developed LASIK, which corrects vision problems. A household item such as an electronic toothbrush, the technology that went into Sonicare toothbrush was funded by an SBIR award. According to NIH, which made the award, SBIR funding allowed the firm that developed the technology to create a $300 million business employing over 500 individuals. In my home state of Maine, Tex-Tech Industries has researched and developed high-tech textiles that are used in body armor for U.S. troops and bulletproof vests for public safety personnel. Tex-Tech also developed a fire-resistant material to be used as a primary fire barrier in the seating cabins of new commercial aircraft. Additionally, Biosciencecom in Maryland is responsible for the MarkPap system, which is a diagnostic device that tests for cervical cancer and can be used as a research tool to improve cervical cancer screening. Other companies like Symantec, which makes antivirus software for computers, and Genzyme, one of the world's leading biotechnology firms, all received SBIR funding at some point during their formative years. Some of these firms are now using household names. Others are still businesses with a plethora of novel ideas. As these examples demonstrate, SBIR funding has helped small businesses nationwide develop incredible breakthrough technologies for a whole host of applications. These are innovations that we use in our everyday lives that help strengthen our national defense and improve our health and that boost our competitiveness. Regrettably, the SBIR program expired in September 2008 and has been subject to a series of 10 short-term temporary extensions since then. plaguing the program with uncertainty and potentially dissuading some of our nation's most promising firms from participating in them. This is legislation that our committee has worked to have signed into law for nearly 6 years, since the time, in fact, when I was chair of the committee. Indeed, we passed legislation out of the Small Business Committee unanimously in 2006 to preempt this stalemate by making improvements to the program and doubling the SBIR allocation from 2.5% to 5% over 5 years, and doubling the STTR allocation immediately. Last Congress, with the chair, we once again passed legislation out of a committee unanimously, which was very similar to the bill we reported out in the previous Congress. Specifically, it maintained the allocation increases spread out incrementally and the 18-8 compromise on the venture capital issue. This time, the full Senate passed the legislation unanimously and sent it to the House of Representatives, where the bill sat. And so the legislation that we are debating today, Mr. President, is very similar to the bill that we passed out unanimously just 3 months ago. But we've already wasted too much time over the past several years, and it is now vitally critical that we act now and pass this legislation to provide these crucial innovation initiatives with certainty for the future. As the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has noted, and I quote, "Even though this program for small business has a proven track record of success, its full potential has been held hostage by a series of short-term reauthorizations, which has created uncertainty for the SBIR program managers and limitations for potential small business grant recipients," end quote. As in the previous 2 Congresses, our legislation increases the allocation for SBIR from 2.5% of an agency's extramural research and development to 3.5% for over 10 years, and doubles the STTR allocations from 0.3 to 0.6% over 5 years. This means that the federal government can make more awards to a greater number of small businesses out of its existing research and development budget. It would also codify increased award sizes of $150,000 for Phase 1 and $1 million for Phase 2 in the SBIR program, and apply those levels to the STTR program as well to adjust for inflation. The last statutory increase in the award sizes for the SBIR program was 19 years ago as part of the 1992 reauthorization, and it is critical that we bring the program into the 21st century to acknowledge the growing cost of quality research. Furthermore, in December, Chair Landrieu and I sent a letter to the SBA Administrator Karen Mills stating that rooting out fraud and abuse in the agency's program will be our committee's first priority this Congress. To that end, our bill includes stringent oversight and fraud prevention measures, requiring inspectors general of participating federal agencies to establish fraud detection measures. In a similar vein, the legislation includes a series of data collection provisions that we worked on with Senator Coburn to ensure that we have a better base of information to use when considering future policy changes to the programs and engaging in necessary oversight. This Reauthorization Act contains an unprecedented compromise on the venture capital issue, which has long bogged down any serious progress in reauthorizing these valuable programs. My long-standing guiding principle on reauthorization of these programs has been simple. These are small business programs, not big business programs or venture capital programs. So I've worked closely with Chair Landrieu to ensure that changes we make to these programs keep it squarely as a small business venture. And the unprecedented landmark compromise on the venture capital issue passes this test. Our compromise has the backing of diverse stakeholders from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, NFIB, the Small Business Technology Council, to the Biotechnology Industry Organization, and the National Venture Capital Association, and a whole host of other organizations, as you can see on this chart. It is critical to note that both of these funding programs is meant to serve as an early seed capital for eligible small businesses. In general, venture capital companies invest in firms that are farther along in their development and commercialization, and they focus on larger investments that are easier to manage than is normally appropriate for many small innovative technology firms. Nonetheless, particularly for firms in the biotechnology industry, venture capital investment is essentially a necessity to commercialize their technology. Here are what some of the groups endorsing our legislation have to say about the compromise that we arrived at. And I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that all the letters of support we have received regarding this legislation be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
The Biotechnology Industry Organization noted, and I quote, "This bill represents a balanced approach to ensure that America's most innovative small businesses can access existing incentives to grow jobs by commercializing new discoveries." And the Chamber of Commerce said, and I quote, "This landmark compromise bill, if passed into law, would unlock the door for entry for businesses that acquire equity funding through venture capital firms without diminishing the program's effectiveness for traditional small businesses, thus setting the stage for a robust and revitalized SBIR program," end quote. And that's really our goal here, a modern program that recognizes the reality of today's innovative small businesses and provide the appropriate environment in which they can flourish. Given the nature of the compromise that we have reached, from increasing allocations over a number of years to allowing limited participation by majority-owned venture capital firms, we must allow time for these programs to take shape and enhance these programs. That is why our legislation reauthorizes these measures for 8 years through 2019. Indeed, the past two reauthorizations of this legislation, these programs, have been for 8 years each, in 1992 and 2000, as was the last reauthorization for the Technology Research Program in 2001. This long-term reauthorization will allow more small businesses to access these funding without the fear of constant interruptions based on the whims of whether or not Congress will extend these programs for an indefinite period of time. Indeed, a company's life cycle in either of these programs is by nature a multi-year process. A Phase 1 award lasts 6 months, while a Phase 2 award will last for 2 years. And that time frame doesn't include the time that it takes for businesses to apply for funding and await a decision, as well as the time between the 3 phases waiting for new solicitations from agencies. It will also allow, Mr. President, the Government Accountability Office to effectively study the venture capital compromise over time to see if it is serving its intended purpose of allowing promising small businesses to utilize these resources. We include a provision in the bill mandating that the GAO issue a report on the subject 3 years after enactment and every 3 years thereafter. By reducing the length of the reauthorization, we would be allowing this delicate compromise to be relitigated immediately without the benefit of studying its impact, and we would effectively negate any modicum of certainty provided in the pending legislation. Finally, on the matter of procedure, let me know that I'm very pleased that the Majority Leader has indicated that he'll be allowing an open amendment process to this legislation. I think that that is also important as well as necessary for working through these issues and others that are critical to our consideration. So, Mr. President, I thank you for the consideration, but I most especially want to thank the Chair of the Small Business Committee for providing the kind of leadership that's been so essential to bring this legislation forward, you know, after 10 reauthorizations and for about 8 years in the process to bring it to this point that I think will be critical for the innovation that's so essential to creating new products and also to create new jobs that we desperately need in our economy. So I thank the President.
Thank you so much, Senator Snowe. I couldn't have a better partner on this committee, and her expertise is noted and admired among the members here, and has served as a member of this committee, oftentimes as its chair for many years. So I appreciate her help and the help of her staff as well. I'd just like to add in the 10 minutes that we have left just a couple of specifics about the specifics of the compromise, as Senator Snowe has outlined. And it is true that this program has been sputtering along on very uncertain terrain because of every 3 months or 6-month reauthorizations hastily put forward, because there's been no agreement on a few of the details. We finally reached an agreement on some of those details, the largest of which had to do with the percentage of awards that could be given or funded to companies that are owned by venture capitalists. This program was started as a small business program. Senator Snowe and I feel very strongly and the same to try to keep it as a small business entrepreneurial program, but to obviously recognize the changes in opportunities for capital presented by some venture capitalists out there. So that has been the subject of the largest piece of negotiation, and I'm happy to say that we have letters of support from the Bay Area Innovation Alliance, the Bio District from New Orleans, just to name one, the Biotechnology Council, that are all very supportive of this compromise, and I'll submit their letters to the record. Connect, which is out of the University of California, another important player in this particular field. Dawnbreaker, a commercialization company, they were part of helping us forge this important compromise. I also want to note that the guidelines, the awards have been raised from the first stage from $100,000 to $150,000, from $750,000 to $1 million for Phase 2, and allows for sequential Phase 2 awards. Another important change, and I want to particularly thank Senator Colburn for this, for agreeing to an 8-year extension. We think, Mr. President, for a program like this that is dealing with technologies that sometimes take years to develop, can be very promising, but it takes some planning, it takes patience, that this is not a program that lends itself readily to 2 to 4 year reauthorizations. It's too much uncertainty for a program like this. Maybe other programs at the federal government should go through 4-year or 5-year reauthorizations, but we pressed, both Senator Snowe and I, for a longer time. Senator Colburn was somewhat reluctant, but we are very grateful that he and others stepped up and said 8 years would be a good compromise in that way, and we're grateful. So this will be a very important authorization because it will set the direction for the next 8 years for our federal agencies. We've also made an important change, and I'm very pleased about this because I think that you can have all the greatest programs in the world, but if you're not focused on quality, if you're not focused on exchanging best practices, if you're not focused on good management of those programs, even some of the best intentions, fall apart, or the taxpayers' money is wasted. We do not want to see that happen here. So we have set aside a small portion for administration, which was recommended by the study of oversight, so that the managers at each of these departments can be better trained to actually identify promising technologies, make sure that they're sort of requesting in the right areas the kind of technologies that they're looking for, and be able to receive that information in a more professional way. So that is an important component of this compromise. The 3% allocation for administration and oversight. As said, it reauthorizes it for 8 years. The arrangement between venture capital and small businesses, and that kind of capsulizes the major changes. I do want to recognize Senator Rockefeller's amendment, which he put on in the 111th Congress, which is a policy directive against waste, fraud, and abuse. Senator Rockefeller has been very helpful in this regard. His amendment, along with others, requires inspector generals to participate in participating federal agencies to establish fraud detection measures, coordinate fraud-related information sharing between agencies, and provide fraud prevention related to education and training of the administration. And in addition to all of this, it actually gets even better because Senator Snowe and I have figured out a way to reduce the cost from the last Congress to this Congress from $229 million over 5 years to $150 million. So we're being as efficient with taxpayer dollars as we can, strengthening administration and fraud detection, giving a longer lead time, if you will, and runway for some of these technologies. And again, we think this is a model program in the world. We don't think we know that because of the research and review that's been done of this program and because what we hear from other countries. They wonder, how does your system work? Well, this is one important aspect, that the government does have a role to play. Not the most significant role, potentially, but a portion of one of the most significant roles to play in promoting entrepreneurship, creativity, innovations, and expanding the number of patents that are issued in the United States by providing programs like this that give an open door and access and a level playing field to the very smallest businesses in America to give them a chance to compete against some of the big guys. And that's really what this is all about. Mr. President, let me see if the ranking member has anything else to add. And we have a few minutes left, and she may have one or two other things to add as we close out for the lunch period.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. President. I think that the points that you raised are very critical because of the contributions that these programs have made to our economy, and most especially because much of the innovation that occurs in America comes from small businesses. In fact, in this report, and the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation underscores this, is that, the innovations coming from big companies is actually on the decline. And so we really do depend upon the entrepreneurial spirit, of small businesses that create the niche for the kind of innovation that we require in America if we're going to be on the vanguard of change and the vanguard of technology and advancements that are so crucial to moving forward as a nation, and that the SBIR program in particular has played a very crucial role in that regard. And I think that this report truly does emphasize to the degree to which it has played a paramount role over the years since the program was created in 1982. So it certainly has had, I think, an extraordinary history in that regard. And, we talk about a lot of programs that we underwrite, here at the federal level. But I can tell you this is a good use of taxpayers' dollars when we're thinking about how we maximize taxpayers' dollars within the federal agencies that are now utilizing these programs, of which we have 11 different agencies that are setting aside the research and development funds specifically to ensure that small business have a, allocation among the research and development dollars so that they get their fair share, because that's where the innovation is derived from in the final analysis. And that certainly have been the indication of the many results that we have achieved due to these programs, and that's what makes them, I think, outstanding in that regard, because you can draw a cause and effect relation between the effectiveness of these programs among the agencies that award them to small businesses, and they've become the true laboratories for the innovation. And that transformation, as this report indicated, has been, I think, central to the types of technologies that have emerged over the last 3 decades. And we want to continue to advance these programs because they are undeniably beneficial and well worth the investments that are made by these agencies because of their required set-asides for these programs, and to ensure that small businesses are part of the research and development funding that is in the billions of dollars at the federal level. If you look at the collective budgets of just these 11 agencies, we want to make sure that small businesses are key to our growth, our technological growth, and therefore having these types of programs, I think, can become a major force in developing our innovative economy, as this report indicated recently. So, again, I want to thank the Chair for her efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Ranking Member Snow. And Mr. President, according to the previous agreement, I think we're going to move to a quorum call at this point. And then within a short period of time, I think the leadership is going to offer 2 amendments, lay down 2 amendments, and then after lunch, of course, we'll be open to consider others. We're hoping they'll be limited to the subject matter before us, but it is an open debate on this bill. So I'd like to suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the committee report and amendments be agreed to on block. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table on block.
Without
The
objection.
amended version of S. 493 be considered original text for the purpose of further amendment. That Senator Nelson of Nebraska then be recognized to offer an amendment to S. 493. That following the reporting of the Nelson amendment, the amendment be set aside and the Republican leader be recognized to offer a first-degree amendment to the bill. And following the reporting of the McConnell amendment, the Republican leader be recognized for up to 5 minutes for debate only relative to his amendment. That following the Republican leader's remarks, the Senate resume consideration of the Nelson of Nebraska amendment. Senator Nelson be recognized for up to 10 minutes for debate only relative to his amendment. And if I would ask that this be modified to allow the Republican leader to speak for whatever time he needs.
Without objection. The Republican Leader.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. President,
The Senator from Nebraska.
I ask unanimous consent to call up the amendment I just offered to the
Clerk will report.
Senator from Nebraska, Mr. Nelson proposes an amendment numbered 182. It is the
President, I
simple...
ask for dispense with the reading of the bill.
Without objection. Republican Leader.
Mr. President, with gas prices on the rise, Americans want to know what Washington's going to do about it. So let me provide a little update. The White House has responded by locking up domestic energy supplies and pushing an energy tax that will drive gas prices up even higher. And Democrats in Congress aren't doing anything at all. So we've got a total disconnect right now between Democrats in Washington when it comes to gas prices. Both the White House and Democrats in Congress are acting like they haven't seen a nightly newscast or driven by a gas station in weeks. Senator Inhofe, Senator Murkowski, and Senator Barrasso have done a terrific job of raising the alarm on the administration's efforts to lock up domestic energy, even as it continues to push costly new regulations at the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to commend them for their efforts on this most important and timely issue. They've shown how American families are getting a double whammy right now. Refiners would pass the costs related to these regulations on to consumers, and the White House efforts to lock up domestic energy production puts even more pressure on gas prices. If you're just tuning in, let's review what the White House has been up to on that front. They've resisted our push for American production offshore, onshore, and in Alaska, and the jobs that go along with it. They've canceled existing drilling permits and the jobs that come with them. They've needlessly delayed offshore leases, which even former President Clinton has referred to as ridiculous. They've imposed a moratorium on oil and gas drilling, which amounts to a moratorium on domestic energy-related jobs. They've proposed a tax on domestic energy production. It might be called a minivan tax. And now they're trying to impose a backdoor national energy tax through the EPA. It's a strange way to respond to rising gas prices. But it's perfectly consistent with the current Energy Secretary's previously stated desire to get gas prices here in the U.S. up to where they are in Europe. These new regulations would destroy jobs at a time when Americans need them the most, and they'd be especially devastating for states like Kentucky and other coal states. EPA regulations resulting in dramatic energy price increases would jeopardize the livelihoods of the 18,000 miners in Kentucky and the additional 200,000 jobs that depend on coal production and the low cost of electricity that Kentuckians enjoy. They'd raise the price of everything from electricity, gasoline, fertilizer to the food we eat, and that's why farmers, builders, manufacturers, small businesses, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce oppose them and support an effort to stop them. But the White House is determined to get its way, and that's why they're attempting to do through regulation what they couldn't do through legislation, regardless of whether the American people want it or not. In my view, it's an insult to the millions of Americans who are already struggling to make ends meet to find a job. 14 million Americans are looking for work. Gas prices are approaching $4 a gallon. And the Obama administration wants unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats to impose new regulations that will destroy even more jobs and drive gas prices even higher. If you want proof that common sense is taking a back seat to ideology in the White House, look no further. This plan is bad for jobs and bad for the economy, and it must be stopped. And that's why at the end of my remarks, I'll be introducing an amendment to block it. In an effort to prevent the administration from adding yet another burdensome, job-destroying regulation through the back door, we'll have a vote on whether, at a time of rising gas prices and growing concern about the scope of government, we should allow the White House to impose new energy regulations through the EPA. This vote is needed because the White House appears ready to advance its goal by any means possible, regardless of our economy or the will of the people. And that's why it's my hope that we'll vote to stop this power grab in its tracks. Now, Mr. President, I want to in particular give credit to Senator Inhofe. This is legislation that he has introduced and been promoting. It is exactly the same legislation that's moving over in the House of Representatives. It's time the Senate took a stand on this measure as well. I believe there's an amendment pending